Good morning, First Baptist Church, and welcome to this week's edition of Spiritual Formation, Spiritual Moment, Spiritual Reflection. It has many names. But if you recall, last week we began a weekly study of the book of Amos. And we will look at the entire book of Amos, all 9 chapters. And if we continue to meet virtually here on Tuesdays, we will look at the other minor prophets. So it's a study of the minor prophets, but in particular, at least for the next 8 weeks, it's a study of the small book of Amos. So if you have your copy of the biblical text, turn to Amos chapter 2. We looked at chapter 1 last week. And if you will remember, Amos was a country prophet who was from the south, from Judah, but he went up north to deliver a prophecy from God. So this would be like someone from Irwin going to Johnson City and speaking ill of Johnson City. The folks in Johnson City may not like that. They may say, "Who do you think you are coming from Irwin, coming from Unicoi County? You don't know what life is like here." I would imagine that Amos received some of the same feedback, as he was a southern prophet, but his prophecy was against the people in the north. And so he spends the majority of his time up north in a foreign place in Israel, telling them everything that they were doing wrong. And if they wanted to avoid punishment, then they would straighten up, so to speak. Last week in chapter 1, he spends much of his time speaking against the nations that surround Israel and Judah. And the point he was making is God is a God of all. God is not just a God of some. God hates injustice for all peoples, not just for his own. In chapter 2, he's going to speak some toward Moab, foreign nation. He's going to speak some toward Judah. So here's the southern kingdom where Amos is from. But starting in 2 and following through 9, the prophecy is toward the people in the north, Israel. So if you would, let's read together, read along with me, chapter 2 of the book of Amos. I will be reading from the Message version. I don't know if you have that version. If you do, I would encourage you to follow along with me. It's Eugene Peterson's translation of the Bible. And the reason why I tend to rely on this version is it's solid, and it reads like a narrative. It reads like a story. And I just love the way he's able to bring stuff out through the imagery that he uses through his word. So starting in Amos chapter 2, God's message. Because of the 3 great sins of Moab, make that 4, you'll recall that he used this phrase over and over in chapter 1. It was a refrain, so to speak. The 3 great sins make that 4. I'm not putting up with her any longer. She violated the corpse of Edom's king, burning it to cinders. For that I am burning down Moab, burning down the forts of Keroth. Moab will die in the shouting, go out in the blare of war trumpets. I'll remove the king from the center and all of his princes with him. God's decree, God's message. Because of the great sins of Judah, make that 4. I'm not putting up with them any longer. They rejected God's revelation, refused to keep my commands. They swallowed the same old lies. They got their ancestors onto dead-end roads. For that, I'm burning down Judah, burning down all the forts of Jerusalem. Because of the 3 great sins of Israel, make that 4. So another refrain. I'm not putting up with them any longer. They buy and sell upstanding people. People for them are only things, making ways of making money. They'd sell a poor man for a pair of shoes. They'd sell their own grandmother. They'd grind the penniless into the dirt, shove the luckless into the ditch. Everyone and his brother sleeps with the sacred whore, a sacrilege against my holy name. Stuff they extorted from the poor is piled up at the shrine of their God. While they sit around drinking wines, they've conned from their victims. In contrast, I'm always on your side. I destroyed the Amorites, who confronted you. The Amorites with the statute of great cedars, though as thick oaks. I destroy them from the top branches down. I destroy them from the roots above. And yes, I'm the one who delivered you from Egypt, then led you out through the wilderness for 40 years, and then handed you over to the country of Amorites like a piece of cake on a platter. I raised up some of your men to be prophets, set aside your best youth for training in holiness. Isn't this so, Israel? God's decree. But you made the youth in training break training, and you told the young prophets, don't prophesy, you're too much for me. I'm hard-pressed to the breaking point. I'm like a wagon piled high and overloaded, creaking and groaning. When I go into action, what will you do? There's no place to run, no matter how fast you run. The strength of the strong won't count. Fighters won't make it. Skilled archers won't make it. Fast runners won't make it. Chariot drivers won't make it. Even the bravest of all your warriors won't make it. He'll run off for dear life, stripped naked. God's decree. So what is the message to Israel, the northern kingdom? The message is that you are not concerned for one another. You are taking one another for granted. Again, I mentioned this last week, but it continues to hold true as we march through this small book. It is so important that we view people as little images of God, because that's who they are. And what Amos is saying to the people in the north is, well, you're right, Logan. If you sell your own grandmother, that's pretty bad. That's quite an accusation. So what Amos is saying to folks in the north is, you do not respect human life. You have no respect for these little images of God. Keep in mind, it's not just you and I who are images of God. Every living, breathing person on this planet is created, is made in the image of God. And Amos wants the people of the north to realize this. You are in the image of God, but so are your neighbors. So are the folks you come across on a daily basis who may not look like you or talk like you or believe like you. So they completely disrespect humanity. You notice he encourages them to take a walk with him down memory lane. This is verse 10. And yes, I am the one who delivered you from Egypt, led you safely through the wilderness for 40 years. So I picture Amos saying to the people up north, take a walk with me down memory lane. Do you know what God has done for you? We see this in other places in Scripture where God invites us to take that walk down memory lane. Do you remember how I delivered you? He did this quite often with the Israelites. Remember how I delivered you from Egyptian slavery? You were enslaved for 40 years, and I brought you up out of Egypt. This is God's way of saying, remember who you are. You're a little image of God. You are part of the beloved community of God. How many times do we forget who we are and who we represent? I think we need to take heed of God when God says to you and me, take a walk with me down memory lane. Remember when I brought you up out of Egypt. Remember when I was your guide and your strength and your bulwark who never failed you. Remember that. I think that's what's wrong with the people up north here in Israel. They've forgotten who they are, who they represent. Folks, that's my encouragement to you on this day. As Amos speaks to the people of God about respecting human life, about seeing people as created in the little images, as being little images of God, images of Christ, that we not forget who we are. You and I are created in the image of God, but so is everyone else. Take a walk with God down memory lane. Allow God to remind you exactly who you are as a person of faith. Next Tuesday morning at 10:30, we will be in Amos chapter 3. I hope that you will plan on joining us as we walk through this book. book. But it has been a joy to spend this time of spiritual reflection with you. I'm able to look at the comments now. Brenda Keckley says, good morning. Good morning to you. Good morning to you, Dan Kiernan. Logan says, good morning. Good morning, Tony Peterson and Logan. Twerpy said, my father used to say, remember whose daughter you are to me whenever I left home. I think he remembered that I was a child of God. What a great reminder, especially for parents to say to their children, remember who you represent. Remember whose daughter you are. You are a child of God. Thank you for that, Twerpy. And Tony says, I'm heading to Vanderbilt tomorrow. Please say prayers for a safe and successful trip. Absolutely, Tony. And again, it was so good to meet you in person on this Sunday, and I can't wait to get to know you better. Remember, we have our Zoom Bible study tonight at 7:30, or is that 7 o'clock? It's 7 o'clock. Sorry, at 7 o'clock, Logan Engel will be leading that study. You can jump in the study. You can jump out the study at any time. But all that information may be found in an email that was sent out this morning. Thank you, 7 o'clock, for confirming that. And we would love to be able to spend that time together with you tonight on Zoom. Thank you for joining us. I'll see you next Tuesday at 10:30.